professional ID, um, because if at any point you lose that domain, or for some reason you do not have access to that ID anymore, and this is a pretty common sense stuff, right? You might say, oh, what is he talking about? Well, yeah, but a lot of people miss out on this, and what happens is when they lose access to that email, they lose access to your um, Unreal Engine, well, a lot of other things, okay? Because you might want to change password, you don't have access to that email. So it has happened to me in the past. It's better you associate it with a personal ID, like a Gmail, Hotmail, Live, whatever, okay? The sorts. And you get two main choices in how you want to use the engine. One is completely free, all right, no strings attached. And the other is completely free, but with some strings attached, right? Both will allow you to download and use the engine with no kind of subscription, no kind of payment, no kind of limitations. Like there are softwares out there which do give you free versions of it. I can think of is Houdini. All right. If you want the full package, well, you have to pay like you are an enterprise, right? But you do get versions of Houdini, which is just the engine, and it can integrate with other um, softwares, but it's not the full software. And you're greeted with this browser. Now, this browser will differ based on whether you open it or you're opening the engine for the first time or consecutive times. All right. For the first time, you will not find anything in the recent project section. All right. This will be empty. You will just have the categories that to choose from. Now, it's not a hard and fast rule that you have to stick with the exact category of what you want to create. So there might be a category that doesn't fall into any of these lists. So it kind of doesn't matter. But what these are meant to do is to give you a starting point, so that you don't have to do a lot of menial tasks every single time that you create a project. Even there are even levels which can be suited to the need. Like for example, in automotive, if I press next, there is a photo studio in which you can just place your automotive design and get started. The entire the studio setup is set for you to start shooting cinematic shots. All right. And another example is the handheld AR. A lot of settings have already been done for you. And another good example would be the VR template. A lot of optimization related settings, a lot of like for example, deferred versus forward rendering, MXA settings for anti-aliasing, virtual reality related settings are already done for you. There is a pawn that you can possess as well. And they come with a basic setup in which they detect which headset you're using. So the model that you can see in the world also changes. So there's a lot, right? Teleportation system, grabbing components. There's a lot that is already pre-done for you. Vehicle Advanced gives you a physics system that you don't have to rig on your own. You just have to place your own car on top of the whole physics system that has already been created. So now for today, we're creating a game. So I'm going to select game and press next. And I kind of don't want any of these templates. Mainly, I could really do with, say, a first person template. Okay, it could really help me out, or a third person template. So we'll start with blank, clean, empty project with no code. Okay, so press next. And here is where you make some of the project settings related decisions. Like for example, do you want to start with Blueprint or do you want to be coding in C++? Well, two things are amiss here. One, you can go all the way to a AAA game publishing with blueprints. People have already done it. It's proven. Okay. So it's not a platform to be proven. It works simultaneously with all the tools that the engine has to provide you. Its underlying system is itself C++. So you don't have to worry. It's not like a surface level system which bars you from accessing underlying stuff right? Just because it's simple. No, it's not. It can get really complicated even with blueprints. Okay, reside. So choose a name accordingly. So let's just call it bowling game UE. I think it has a character limit as well. I don't think you can keep going on this. Yeah, I think it has a 20 characters limit page. Okay. If you have opened the engine prior to this, especially with starter content enabled, then it'll open up pretty fast, just like this. Okay. And you might get this notification, new plugins are enabled, available. You can manage plugins, click on manage plugins. And there are a few plugins that you would always want to keep enabled, whether you use them or not. One of them is the modeling toolset. So I'm going to type modeling in the search box on top. Okay, so what I did was I clicked manage plugin. So that opened up this window, and then modeling. And now it says, gives you a disclaimer about it being beta and all of that. Say yes, don't bother. And now it'll ask you to restart. So just press that. At any time you enable a plugin, the engine needs to restart. All right, so we're back in, and we can close this window now. And I know most of you, you're at level 1, being from level 0 to 10, the range that we talked about. So you must have opened the engine at least once. I'm sure most of you have used some of the other game engine before, so you already know the structure. Okay, and I'm sure most of you have used Unity before. So you have a project, and it being a single project, it can have multiple levels inside it. Okay, it can have 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. Okay, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Okay, and a project consists of 2 things. Okay, inside it. One is engine content, stuff that you cannot expect to have to import every single time, stuff that you cannot expect to have to build from scratch every single time, like a light, a trigger box, a post-process volume. So these are called engine content. But then there are content that you have to import, and that you cannot expect the project to, or the engine to ever come bundled with, which is your content browser stuff. All right, stuff that you import in, and they remain in your content browser. Or even your engine can have many inbuilt stuff. So let's start with just a content browser stuff. So let's say you imported a shape and a texture. All right, and maybe 2, 3 different kinds of textures. Just a little bit of basics. Okay, I'm sure you guys already know this, but just let's just say it's a refresher on how a basic software works. Anyway, so we can have this geometry inside level 1, use it there. We can also have the same geometry inside level 2, and so on and so forth. In level 2, if I want this geometry to not be, say, blue, say be red, that can be accomplished without affecting the geometry already placed in level 1, which was blue. Say the material was blue. Okay, and now that's just an example. It could have any other sets of properties that you might change when you bring it into level 2. So what I'm trying to say is, you import content, and then you have content, and you can use them as many times and in as many levels as you want. And these levels are like their own bubble. Okay, everything happening inside this is secluded just to itself. All right, there are ways in which levels can communicate between each other, or certain scripting can allow the communication or retention of information between levels. Okay, but in general, whatever you do by default inside any level is restricted just to that level. Okay, there are ways in which you can affect files which will become an universal change wherever you have used the file. Like, for example, if I change this geometry the geometry that I have imported in the content browser, if I change it, okay, fundamentally, if I change it, then this will just not be a change to this source file over here. It will affect the instance of it every single place that it's been used. So it'll change it over here, and it will change it over here as well. But at the same time, will retain the information that is unique to it in its own level. So unless that is what you have changed, okay? Now the source also has a source, which is the file in the Windows Explorer. If that gets affected, obviously this gets affected. But that's a given. That everybody knows that, all right? So anyways, this is your general file structure. And if it's difficult to understand, then the best example for this is an Excel sheet, all right? Excel file. I'm sure everybody's used Excel. And in an Excel file or a project, or say an XLS file, .xls file, you can have multiple pages. Okay, page 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So a Unreal Engine project, for that matter, any other game engine project, is just like that. The project is one, but inside that lives many different levels if you wish for it to be so. Okay, just like an Excel sheet is one sheet, but it has many pages inside it. All right. So very basic example. I know some of you guys must be like, what is being discussed? Get on with the game, man. And we'll do that right now. All right. So, but just to bore you a little bit more, we'll talk about the UI just so that there is no doubts at all whatsoever as to where what is, if you need it, and what happens when I'm quickly doing something and you miss it. So if I mention them next time I'm accessing these panels, you won't be confused. What happened? What just happened? Where did he just click? So you won't be confused at all. All right. So again, you have your internal engine content always in your place actors tab. Okay. So your place actors tab is like your hub to get anything that you need as a basic engine content, like your volumes for game design, like kill Z volume, audio volume, nav mesh bounds, post process volume, trigger volume. You can even create basic geometry using geometry brushes. They're called BSPs. Okay. Before the new modeling tool set, these were the only ways to create geometry inside the engine. Believe it or not, there was a time when this was not Unreal Engine, it was UDK, and you had no way of importing any custom geometry inside the engine. The only way that you could create an entire or flesh out an entire level was by means of BSPs. Okay. And these are primitive shapes that you can then add lines, vertices, and stuff to, and then you can manipulate them. But the controls are not intuitive like a modeling tool. So they are now legacy. Okay. But you can use them. All right. They're really useful sometimes. You have visual effects stuff like volumetric clouds, sky atmosphere, decals, planar reflection, which is like a mirror reflection. And then you have cinematic actors like camera, cine camera, sequencer, which is a timeline that lets you create cinematics or cutscenes. Okay. And you have your basic light actors that everyone needs. Okay. Directional light, which is like the sun, point light, spotlight, direct light, which is your man-made light, and your skylight, which is like your indirect light source from your scene. Okay. Generally, you'll always be in basics, but if you don't want to go into any of this category, you can just search for stuff like, example, post process. If I type, I get the post process volume. I always type it out. I never go into any of these sections looking for what I want. It's just a waste of time. I can just write process, I get post process volume. And then we were making a comparison between Windows Explorer and content browser, where you have the hive on the left side, which shows you the entire hierarchy of folders that you have. And then you select a folder from among that hierarchy. Like, for example, I open up starter content, and inside starter content, there are A to T, all these folders. And then you open up another folder and you know what's inside there. So as you can see, nothing is changing on the right side. It's just showing me what's inside content the main content folder, which is just starter content. And when I select a folder, it shows me what's inside that folder. And level files And as you can see, it's a name. It has a name, minimal default, because we chose a default empty template, right? We have a project name over here, which is called bowling game underscore UE. And you have your level name over here, which is this file. Okay. All right. So if you want to open up that level, you double click this file, as simple as that. Now, if you have not opened up starter content before in this project, then you'll see there's something that's happening called shader compiling. And that's fairly common if you keep using Unreal, because shaders need to compile every single time, and especially for the first time that you use the project. And if your project has a lot of shaders, which is basically going to be materials, it will take that much amount of time to load up every single time. And now this level is like a library of sorts to show you what all excuse me, what all materials that you have do you get with the starter content. Along with that, there's some physics simulations, which if you simulate this game, so I guess you guys can hear what I'm hearing. So this is just a demonstration map. Okay. Now they look wrong or a bit too dark, mainly because shaders are still compiling. Okay. And this compilation time is highly dependent on what kind of system you have. If you have a hard drive, this will be 5 times slower. If you have a SSD, it'll be fairly fast enough. And if you have a M.2 drive, I guess that's the fastest it can go. But it's also highly dependent on your CPU for the compilation of the shaders. Okay, not GPU, the CPU. All right. So, and they are shown on top of spheres, just to give you an approximate look of how they are supposed to look once you use them on a geometry. And then you have your particles, which show up with just as thumbnails. Your props, which are geometry files, they show up with a little bit of a preview of what they're supposed to be. Okay. And these thumbnails, they can increase in size. So if you go to view options, you can increase the size so you can see better. You can decrease the size as well. And all of these files can be used as is, as you know, but they can be opened up into their own editor as well. Like, for example, if I double click this chair, there's a static mesh, and by which I mean geometry. Okay. Any geometry is called a static mesh inside Unreal, opens up in its own static mesh editor window. Okay. So where you can explore it like its own viewport of sort. I guess the editing part of the static mesh is probably switched off. So I'll just check why. Yeah, that's because Polygon editing is not enabled. Otherwise, if you double click any geometry, you get an additional tab over here called edit. Okay. And once you go there, you are able to edit the geometry a little bit in a very basic way. So that's your static meshes. And then you have textures, which show up as thumbnails, flat thumbnails of what images they are. If you notice, each file type have a certain color associated with it. And I'm not talking about the thumbnail. I'm talking about the underline below each file. So this is a texture file with a red underline. If you go to geometry, they have a blue underline. If you go to materials, they have a green underline. If you go to particles, they have a white underline. If you go to blueprints, they have a deeper blue underline. Okay. Again, blueprints are comparable to prefabs inside Unity, which is to say that they can be a combination of different actors, along with which it can have data that will allow you it to function a certain way. Okay. So it's not just, what do you call it? Not just a combination of different actors. A blueprint can be a set of data only. It can be a set of instructions along with objects working together to give you a desired result or interactivity. So like, for example, this fixture is available as a prop as well, this lamp, wall lamp. Okay. But here it's available as a blueprint. So if you double click that, It opens up as a blueprint editor, and you can see a graph. You can see what this blueprint is made up of in this component section. It again has its own viewports. If you go there, you'll see now this fixture has a light associated with it. Okay. And there's a construction script that lets you decide the brightness, the color, inner cone angle, outer cone angle, and all of that stuff uh, just by making it a blueprint. If I select anything, you see, I have a subsequent selection in the world outliner. Okay. And the world outliner is just a list of all the items that are currently populating a given level. All right. So if I click the sphere, it's a material sphere number 3. If I click this, it's a material sphere number 9. So there is no layer based structure to this. So it doesn't matter what is on top or what is below. It is just a list of items that are there in your level. That's it. Okay. And this is comparable to hierarchy in Unity. World outliner is hierarchy. Okay. And if you select a bunch of files, say all these material spheres, I can hold shift and select them. And I can click this small little folder icon on the top left. And that'll just give me another folder, and I'll call them spheres. Looks like they already had a folder. I just made another one for no reason. But this folder is just an organizational system. It's not something that when you select, you get to select all of them. No, it's not like that. It doesn't have a physical entity in the level. It is just meant for you to organize your display in the world outliner. So you're clutter free. That's about it. Finally, when I select any item in the viewport, you'll see that the details panel gets populated. Well, the most basic details that you need is its location in the world in relation to the world origin. Okay, every level has a world origin. It has a grid X, Y, and Z, and always have an origin point which is 0, 0, 0 in all axes. In relation to that, where is this object is what the value of location is. Its rotation is relative to its original rotation. So right now it's at 0, 0, 0, sorry, 0, 0 minus 90. So in relation to that, if I change it, it will change over here. Now in this blueprint, somebody scripted it in a way in which there is a section called light, and there will be 3 variables in there that I can change. So they are made public. So they're present over here. All right. Now let's talk about the viewport finally before we jump into our level creation. You use right click to look around. Okay, up, down, left, right. And while holding right click, you can use WASD to move around. So W is forward in the direction in which the camera is looking. So if I'm looking down, W is going to go that way. Back is going to go backwards. Right is D, left is A. Okay, so it's all view direction dependent. Okay, you also have the mouse wheel to go ahead and behind. This is in the direction that you're in. If you're looking in this direction, you'll go ahead in this direction, behind in this direction. Okay, and there are view mode in terms of how you access the G buffer. So right now it's a complete G buffer. I can go unlit mode. That'll just show me all the albedos. If I go brush wireframe, that'll just show me the geometry. I can go detail lighting. That'll give me lighting plus reflection. If I go and normals, if I go lighting only, that'll give me just lighting, no normal, no reflection. Okay. If I go reflections, that'll just show me reflectivity on every surface. Looks very creepy. And then there are player collision. That's going to tell me if any actor has collisions associated with it that will interact based on its settings. And visibility collisions, that is always more or less similar to physics collision, because if there's something that I'm going to visibly collide with, I would also probably want my player to collide with. But every visibly colliding object may not have, will have physics collision, or actually no, every visibly colliding object may not have physics collision, But generally, most physics collision always have visibility collision. You have your general controls for transform, which is movement related with the first button. Second button is rotation. Okay. Third button is scale. So, and you can always use your keyboard shortcuts, which is W for movement, E for rotation, and R for scaling. Then you have some snapping tools available and values associated with the snapping. So if I enable them, movement is snapped to 10. Now 10 what? Now dimensions inside Unreal, scale and dimensions are based on centimeters. Okay. So it's actually based on Unreal units, UU. But we know that one Unreal unit is equals to 1 centimeter. So if I deselect this, now I can move freely. Okay. If I enable it again, it will move every 10 centimeters. If I change it to say 500, it will move 500, and my grid sizing also changed based on it. So every 500 centimeters snapping, right? So I'll move it back to 10. And there is rotation snapping as well. So right now the rotation snapping is set to 10 degrees. So it'll transform rotation for every 10 degrees only. I can be harsh and set it to 45. Or I can disable snapping altogether. So it's a free, smooth rotation. All right. So I enable it again, change it back to 10. Scale snapping, and the value is relative to its original size. So 0.25 times the original scale. So right now it's set to 0.25. So if I scale it, it'll scale up 0.25 times its original scale. If I make it 1, it will be double of what it was. Okay. Now what I do is I kind of don't use these. I set it to 3, and then I hold right click and use WASD to move around, as does everybody else. But while holding right click, I can use the scroll wheel. Scroll wheel up will increase my speed, and scroll wheel down while holding right click is going to slow my camera down. So I never have to use that camera speed thingy again, right? So I'll just hold right click and change my speed with the scroll wheel. Very handy. Okay. What else is there? And then finally you have the toolbar on top, which is basically, it's a kind of toolbar that you find on every editor. So if you open up a material editor, it also has a toolbar. If I open up a blueprint editor, it also has a toolbar. All right. Every tool has a toolbar. So this viewport also has a toolbar, and that is to do with the current level. So if I save current, it'll save current level. If I click on settings, it is project related. So if I open up project settings from here, it'll open up project settings, which is the same thing. If you go edit and open up project settings, it's just easier to go to this button. You get plugins as well. You have blueprints that you can access, either blueprints that you can create from selected items or open level blueprints, because levels themselves can have interactivity as a whole that you can code inside the level blueprints. And you can access cinematics and create like a level sequence to get a cutscene or make a video that you can render. All right. And then you have the build button, which allows you to build pre-computed data, like pre-computed visibility, pre-computed light maps, reflections, navigations, all of the stuff that you